I'm going to start with a quick introduction. We're very excited to have some welcome remarks. For those of you who are now joining us for the second part of our annual general meeting, this is now the public panel on the future of science engagement. And we'll begin the next part of our event with introductory remarks from Dr. Danika Goosney, who's the Vice President of Research Grants and Scholarships Directorate of the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada, or NSERC.
Thank you, Marianne. I hope everybody can hear me. It is a pleasure to be here this afternoon. Au CASC-ACCS, nous souhaitons que tous les Canadiens et toutes les Canadiennes se considèrent comme des découvreurs et des innovateurs. I am absolutely thrilled to have the opportunity to introduce the panel, The Future of Science Engagement. This panel reflects a lot of what NSERC tries to do with its science promotion efforts, exploring emerging approaches and platforms for making science relevant and accessible. That is why NSERC is so proud to be the driving force behind Science Literacy Week, which kicked off yesterday on September 21st and ends on September 27th. We are also proud supporters of the science centers and museums across the country that promote STEM learning as an important part of our lives. And today, your work is more important than ever. Online learning, homeschooling, and the battle against misinformation have become everyday realities over the past 6 months. Les familles ne s'éloignent peut-être pas de chez elles, mais elles recherchent des experts compétents pour les aider à enseigner et à demeurer bien informés. Canadians want to understand the challenges we're facing and how we're going to solve them. Kids have questions, parents have questions, and science communicators can provide some of the answers. De nombreux centres de sciences et musées au pays ont déjà adapté leur programme afin que les familles continuent de participer à une éducation en sciences amusante et accessible pendant la pandémie, ce que le CRSNG apprécie grandement. I'm excited to hear more from the panel today because it feels like an important moment for Canada's science communicators. Today's panelists are reaching young audiences through social media, YouTube, television, and activities that bring science and engineering right into the neighborhoods. Je suis fière que le CRSNG ait pu appuyer certains de leurs efforts, tout comme le Centre de sciences et les musées que nombre d'entre vous représentent aujourd'hui. Our circumstances may be uncertain at the moment, but I do believe there's a bright future for science engagement in Canada. So thank you again for allowing me to be part of this panel. And it is my pleasure now to introduce the moderator for the panel, Dr. Chantal Barriault, who is the Director of Science Communication Graduate Program at Laurentian University in partnership with Science North. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Danika. That was a lovely introduction, and I couldn't agree with you more about the importance of science engagement and the role that our panelists play in doing that. Hi, everyone. I'm recognizing so many faces from my Science Center days. It's really nice to be back, and I do have to say that I feel at home, although I jumped over into academia about 7 years ago. It's still very near and dear to my heart, and Guy will attest to the fact that I still say our Science North and our this and our that, so I'm never too far. I'm really proud to be the director of the Science Communication Program, so thanks for that introduction, Danika, and I'm proud of it because we are producing the Science Communicators of the Future. It's the only science communication program of its kind in North America, as we are partnered with a science center, Science North in Sudbury, and I'm going to take that few seconds to just plug that for a minute. Send me your students. We're also the only master's degree in science communication in Canada. So as of 2017, I hear buzzing that there's science communication master's degrees in the making around the country, but we can still claim to be the only one. And I'm really also very, very happy and honored to be moderating this panel of science communication rock stars, if I may say. A few housekeeping rules before we start, or not rules, but details, I guess. Je présiderai cette session en anglais, mais si vous avez des questions ou des commentaires que vous voulez faire en français, s'il vous plaît, sentez-vous à l'aise de le faire dans le chat et je vais tenter de vous répondre aussitôt que possible ou dans la mesure du possible. So I'll be moderating the panel in English, but if anyone has comments or questions or need clarification, either in English or in French, please use the chat to do so. Tina will be moderating that for me, and because everyone in the audience will be muted, so you won't be able to do that through your voice. You'll have to use text. So welcome to this panel on the future of science engagement. We have a stellar lineup, as we've been alluding to all along, of 4 leading voices among Gen Z and Millennial audiences. All questions, as I said, will have to be entered in the chat box as everyone is on mute. And to make sure that we can sort of really get through what our panelists want to say, we're going to do our best to make room for them and get to some questions if we can near the end. So our stars are going to be sharing with us their emerging approaches and platforms for making science very approachable, very relevant, and accessible to our various audiences across the country. And I'm so looking forward to this lively discussion. So for the next 35 to 40 minutes or so, I'm going to ask them some questions about their work and the way that they see the future of science engagement in Canada. I'll start with a quick introduction, but I want to leave as much room as possible for them to tell us their stories. And so I would going to briefly introduce you to them, and then I'm going to get to the first question and let them have a go. So our first panelist is, and this is in no particular order, Dr. Eugenia Addy, CEO of Visions of Science. We then have Anthony Morgan, founder of Science Everywhere and PhD candidate in science communication, and of course an alumni of our own program. And Dr. Samantha Yammine, neuroscientist, science communicator extraordinaire, and digital media producer. I've ad-libbed a little bit there. So you have all been extraordinary, incredible leaders in the science engagement space in Canada. And I'd like to start this panel by asking you to introduce yourselves, and more importantly, well, maybe not, well, introduce yourselves and also what you or your organization does in this science engagement space, rather than have me explain that to people. So how about we start with you, Eugenia, Dr. Addy?
Sure. Hello, everyone. It's such an honor and pleasure to be with you today. So yes, as Chantal said, I am the CEO of Visions of Science. Really what I run this organization, and what we do and what our focus is to support STEM engagement for youth from low income and racialized, marginalized communities across the Greater Toronto area and beyond. We focus and work with youth from ages 8 to now almost 25, and really provide wraparound long-term supports for them. And so that they can not only be able to experience and engage in hands-on STEM out of school time, but then also give back to their communities in meaningful ways. I'm sure, as many of the panelists will attest to, STEM is everywhere, and we were really trying to ensure, and science is everywhere, and we're really trying to ensure and make sure that our communities are engaged meaningfully, and they have equitable access to meaningful opportunities so that they can be active participants and contributors to this growing field.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Eugenia. That was great. I want to follow up with a question, but I'm going to get to the other panelists first. So Samantha, why don't you take it away now and introduce yourself and sort of what you do in this space?
I'm Samantha Yammine. My pronouns are she and her, and after completing my PhD from the University of Toronto last year, during that PhD I had been sharing what I was doing for research, bringing transparency to the research process through social media. And so when I graduated, I decided, hey, why not take no job offers and instead try to run my own business and scale up the communication efforts that I had started on the side of an already busy PhD. And so that's what I've been doing for the past year. I was fortunately able to start my own media company called Science and Media. And with that, I really try hard to continue engaging folks through digital media with science, whether it's news. This year it's been mostly COVID-19, but also the original ethos was to just let people realize the wonderful marvels of the world around us, and to give a digestible way for people to engage with it on their news feeds, where we typically see a lot of misinformation. So try to deliver that balance. And through my work with Science and Media, I also do consulting and work with other organizations, and really try to connect everyone, because really, as was said, this is a team effort and we all need to work together to reach our big goals.
Great. Thank you very much. I also have questions for you. And finally, our third panelist, Anthony Morgan. Hi, Anthony.
Hi, Chantal, and hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I am delighted to be here with all of you today. I guess I am the founder, CEO, and creative director of a company called Science Everywhere. We're a media and production company focused on building science culture. We weren't subtle with the name. We really wanted to make science everywhere and help people recognize that it is everywhere. A large part of our goal is we try to build social tools for better thinking. And so that has taken the form of lots of work with television, radio, YouTubers, live events. At some point, I vacuum sealed myself to a building downtown, just trying to make it as surprising and engaging as possible. You might have questions about the vacuum sealing thing, but there's a YouTube video.
Sure, they could ask you questions about vacuum sealing yourself to a building, but not yet. So thank you, all three of you, for introducing yourselves and pointing out sort of some key elements of your mission, of what you want to do personally and with your organizations or your companies, depending on what audiences you're engaging with. The next questions that I have are really about unpacking or delve deeper into what your vision is of the future for science engagement in Canada. I'm going to give each of you 2 minutes to, and I'm not the one timing, so I'm going to leave it to Marianne to do that in the chat. So to give us a 2-minute, kind of maybe 3-minute blurb about what your vision is, and little caveats for that. There's words that you already said that I picked up on that I wonder if you could use to as a launching point. So Eugenia, you used a phrase. You said wraparound support, and I just found that fascinating and a really important. I see it. So I don't know if that's a launching off point for you in terms of what your vision is for the future of science engagement, but I'll leave it to you to talk about your vision in 3 minutes.
Well, I think for me, it really goes into what are youth getting, what they need in order to be active participants, and as I said, contributors to science, and especially youth who are commonly not engaged in science, wouldn't necessarily have access to the opportunities or even to the people, or whatever the case might be in science, and how can we make that happen? And when I think of the future, I think of one where everyone has what they need to be able to be actively engaged and meaningfully informed, and they can make the decision that they need to make from there. That's what I hope, and everyone has that. And I think sometimes when we think about science engagement, and I know when I first started off with Visions of Science, we really, sometimes it's really boiled down to like, let's get a couple of kids to make slime at a pop-up workshop and say goodbye, and hopefully they'll become scientists one day. And that's not enough. That's simply not enough. So like with my own personal journey and my own story, there was so much that was needed. I had to deal with so many different barriers within the school system, deal with different things when it came to representation, just being able to have role models, even able to understand how does one become a scientist? What does that mean? What does it mean to be a Black scientist? Where are the Black scientists? What is happening here? So many different things to navigate through and to really kind of understand, and also have the confidence to say, I can be a part of this. I can actually contribute. I have something to say. And oh my goodness, my life experience also can contribute and advance this field, and make, make a better place for everyone. So I think for me, it's that people have what they need in order to be able to participate. And I think that sometimes it's more than what we might think of. I think COVID has exposed the fact that, oh, people need computers.
Right.
What? And I know for Visions of Science, when we first started, when COVID first hit, I think like 50% of our participants didn't even have access to that stuff. And we were like, it's 2020, how? And it's like now, with the school board, everything, people kind of scrambled and got those resources. But we've been talking about this for so many years. Like, if we want to talk about tech and coding, if people don't even have access to the technology, how are we doing this? So it's a lot.
It's a lot.
And I can go along, but essentially that people have what they need in order to do things. And I think we'll be better for it.
Yes.
More voices at the table doing what they need to do.
Wow, so much to pick up on there.
Yeah,
Eugenia, thank you so much. The one takeaway I've got is I'm going to just sum it up by saying it's not enough to make slime. But that's very. Slime. I love slime too, but we are I don't mean to simplify it and trivialize it, but in encapsulating it, I've also heard someone in my circle say, we can't just raise awareness anymore. Like it's not enough. Like raising awareness is just the bottom. It's the easy fruit. So right, I got the 2-minute warning probably 2 minutes ago. So I'm gonna stop and I'm gonna bring in Samantha Yammine, and I'm gonna switch up the order after Anthony so that you're not always the third one. Okay, so we're gonna go with Sam first, and then we'll get to Anthony. So Sam, again, we're looking at the future and the vision of what science engagement can be in Canada, especially with what we've been going through and your role in social media, and how could that how is that going to play in the future of science engagement in Canada?
Absolutely. My vision in general is that, people often will say, oh, are you trying to be the next Bill Nye? And they'll label every new science communicator as the next Bill Nye. No, that is not the vision. That is not the plan. Bill Nye was good for his time, but the goal now is that we have a future where there's not just Bill Nye and Neil deGrasse Tyson. Okay, there's going to be lots of people, and everyone's going to have a science communicator that they relate to and that they trust. And so for me, it's not to become like, I don't want to become famous. I want many hundreds of scientists and science communicators to get visibility so that they can engage. And the key with that is that then you have people engaging in doing community-driven science communication to folks that identify with them, folks with their shared lived experiences. And then that is really where we'll see building trust and more effective engagement instead of just one-offs. Social media helps with that because it democratizes who has a platform. That's also been weaponized from people who want to sell misinformation. And I think that makes it all the more important that science is represented, but that it's not represented in the typical way that someone like, no shade to Bill Nye, someone like Bill Nye might do it, and just dismissive, like, these are facts. And instead, it's people being like, hey, I understand why you, as a woman who's been denied by doctors for the pain you're feeling, I understand why you are mistrustful about this vaccine. Let's chat about it because I've also had that experience. And so social media democratizes, and it allows for these long-term engagements instead of one-offs, so that the same person can message me over a 2-year period and we build a relationship. And now I go back and say, hey, how's your mom doing? I remember that thing happened. Let's chat about this new thing you're curious about. So social media to me is an avenue for democratizing who represents and engages people with science, and for allowing us to build trusting long-term relationships, and for many people to feel engaged with science through those people on social media and building these communities.
So many nuggets, and I'm seeing some of you already on the chat, pulling out these little nuggets that are so important to really latch onto and do something about. So what I'm getting from yours, Samantha, is I really like this idea of not really like, but I think it's important that we move forward with this idea that it's not just another Bill Nye, and I get it too, and our students get it in our science communication program. It's about the shared values and shared lived experiences, not being dismissive when someone does find an issue with something, and wants to discuss it, and building these long-term relationships, and how social media has democratized that for us, and providing a space for building those long-term relationships. Thank you very much. I hope I'm summarizing well enough. And finally, we're going to get to Anthony now. And Anthony, I'm throwing out the similar question to you. How are we, what is your vision for the future of science engagement in Canada? And I know that, you're all about creating these really great, disarming spaces, physical spaces and environments for people to be able to do this in. So go ahead and tell us what your vision is.
Yeah, Eugenia and Samantha are tough acts to follow, but I think that I would be really thrilled to see science engagement move more from focusing on what people think to focusing on how people think. Samantha raised the really good point that because we've democratized these platforms, that it's become easy to weaponize information and misinformation in lots of ways. Science communicators are now a few voices in a sea of other voices that is the internet. And, where many people are looking to Alex Jones to get us through this pandemic. And so I think, we know that misinformation spreads further, faster than other kinds of information. And so I think, although it's crucial that we continue to do the good work of correcting those misperceptions, I think that we also need to treat the illness itself, which I would argue is how we think. And so that's largely what I've been trying to do with Science Everywhere, is to reinforce the values that are conducive to good scientific thinking. And I think there are 5 of those values. For me, they're curiosity, collaboration, calm, creativity, and courage. I wear them sometimes on a shirt to help me remember, because I'm very forgetful. But I'll walk into them. So I think that curiosity, so we all have blind spots in our thinking that are by definition invisible to us. We don't know that they're there. So curiosity means acknowledging that uncertainty, recognizing that I know less than 1% of what's on, let's say, Wikipedia, and so do you. And so the best way to find our blind spots is by talking to people who see things quite differently than you. So to me, collaboration means building that dialogue, building room for conversation with lots of different perspectives. And I think that speaks a little bit to what Eugenia was speaking about as well, but I think we do better when there's diversity in our perspectives. One of the challenges we face is that people don't always want to necessarily engage with scientists, because we have an unfortunate reputation sometimes for taking ourselves a little too seriously. And so to me, calm means fostering a sense of play, not taking ourselves too seriously, creating psychologically safe spaces for people to try on new perspectives. And once we come up with those new ways of looking at the world, we can generate testable hypotheses, try to integrate the best of everybody's perspectives and refine our ideas. So I would argue that creativity is really the fuel for science. It's what fuels science. And courage to me is maybe the most important value, because it's required to practice every other value on that list. Courage is our willingness to see if our new ideas actually hold up in the world, to test our ideas and to be open to them not being what we think they were, and seeing how they hold up. So I think that those values are sort of how we think scientifically. Of course, I'll practice curiosity, and I'm willing to amend those, but I would love to see organizations like science centers cultivating learning environments that really foster those kinds of values.
Wow. Again, thank you so much for all these nuggets, and we're already seeing some of them in the chat. And thanks, Anthony. The nugget I'm pulling out of that is moving away from from what people are thinking to how people are thinking, and fostering the spaces that people feel comfortable doing that in. And of course, your shirt and your ingredients for thinking scientifically. I hope I'm not frozen.
She is a little bit frozen, but her face looks extremely curious, which is good. It's a good Another good reminder, I would say.
Well, you know, and I'm actually, we'll wait until Chantal comes back on. I may have an inkling about what's coming next in case she's frozen and drops off the call.
I'm not frozen. I think I am.
Okay, so we'll wait for her to come back on. But I know next she did want to unpack kind of individual questions. So, and these might be a little bit more quick and snappy, maybe 1 minute responses, something like that.
Thanks, Marianne.
Oh, hey, there you are. I was just segueing to these snappy individual questions.
Yes, thanks for covering. My internet was just I just got kicked off. So I'm going to keep it rolling along. Thanks, Marianne. Yes, you were right. That's what we're moving into next is individual questions. You get 1 to 3 minutes at the most. And I'm going to start with Samantha this time. How's that, Sam? Putting you on the spot. I'm going to delve right into what's at hand right now and what's been really challenging for everyone over the past 6 months for an individual question for you, which is how to tackle COVID misinformation. I know, we don't even have 3 hours. We only have 3 minutes. But I'm sure you have like a couple of, short pieces that you could share with people.
I think this is it's such a web. I think what's really important though is that we do so compassionately. I think compassion is like my C word of the year, if I can add to your shirt, Anthony. It's just so important to be compassionate and engage folks. And I think there's a perception amongst scientists and even some communicators that we shouldn't engage with misinformation because then we'll perpetuate and spread it. And I think that it's good to always be thinking of how we use our social currency online and how we use our time in conversations with people. Example today, when time is limited. So I think it's good to always be cautious of what we share and what we talk about. However, there is good research and anecdotal experience. I would say we do have to address what people are saying, and we do need to see if people are sharing misinformation widely. I think it's actually pretty elitist if we just disregard it and we just say like, nope, not going to talk about that because it's wrong. And instead, I think once something has gained some sort of traction, so my rule on social media is if more than 2 or 3 people have messaged me asking about something, then it means it's popular. Or if my sister, who doesn't read science, has heard about something, I'm like, it's time. So it's time to address it. And I always strive to be very compassionate, try to think of, well, why are people believing this? Why is this person selling this? And to address, like, I know you might be concerned that vaccines, for example, are being rushed and they may be unsafe and that it's all just a big pharma scheme. I also have my reservations about pharma because of these reasons, but here's why I'm trusting of the process. And actually, I haven't made up my mind yet about vaccines because there's not enough data. And so no one should have made up their mind. And so that sort of approach of saying, I hear and see you, here's where I'm at, and let me know, and then send a link instead of being like, that's wrong and stupid, I'm not talking about that, and being angry. I think that's where we lose people. And frankly, it's just rude. So I would really like to see us all taking opportunities to figure out where people are coming from, being compassionate, starting with, I understand, I also feel whatever common ground you have, here's why I'm okay with it, or here's something to consider.
Yeah, valuable lessons. And I can attest to the fact that Samantha actually does this online because I watch her engage with people on a regular basis. And it works. It works when you acknowledge what the space that they're coming from. Absolutely.
The smallest anecdote is someone named Jessica Malati Rivera, who's amazing on Instagram. She collected hundreds of comments of people who got a flu shot this year because of her, because she shared stuff about the flu shot on Instagram. Hundreds of people are now vaccinated, and that's just the people who admitted it. That's like real impact, and it works.
Yeah, real impact. Absolutely. Don't be afraid to engage. And that's where the courage comes in too, which is part of Anthony's motto. Okay, I'm going to go to Eugenia. Eugenia, we're talking about COVID-19 in terms of misinformation, but for you, it means engaging youth in this era. For you and for Visions of Science, and what are new ways that have you been able, or has your organization been able to do that?
You know, it's funny because as soon as the pandemic hit, we our first response wasn't like, oh my goodness, like how are we going to continue to shove science down their throats? It was like, are you okay? Because we're in a global pandemic. You know what I mean? Like, how are you doing? We're working with communities who are now, we know, disproportionately impacted by COVID. So how are you doing? And do you have what you need to survive? So literally, before we thought about science engagement, we went and did community assessments, and we said, do you have access to food? Do you have access to resources? Here are the food banks in your area. This is like, we just did that. And then we're like, everybody good? Okay, let's do some science. You know what I mean? Like, oh, do we have a computer? Like all of those things. And that's what I mean, wraparound support. I think sometimes we and people, the kids who got that support were so amenable, like to all of the science engagement that we did because we demonstrated care. Is that another C? Did we talk about that? Care. And I think that was so important during COVID because you are thrust into isolation. And again, with context, and Sam talked about this too, context, you might be living in an apartment with 6 other siblings and you're told that you have to be in quarantine with them and y'all have one computer and then you have to be in school. There's a lot that like, I don't think people who understand that context, and then a lot of the misinformation and feeling like I don't know who to trust, that's augmented by personal situations. So having, organizations who can kind of be that bridge to be like, oh yeah, there's some stuff going on, but here are ways that we can share information so that you have what you need and it's coming from a place of care is important. So I think that we started with care, and then that made engagement all the while. So we're doing virtual stuff right now, and it's working, and it's going pretty well. So
it's so good to hear. It's so good to hear, and you're so right about the care first, right? Is everybody okay? And now let's engage in science. You know what? You're reminding me of I'm going to have to bring in my learning research in here, and my former students will laugh, but I'm bringing in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if your bottom needs aren't being met, if you don't feel safe and you're hungry and you're worried and you're anxious, how are we supposed to expect you to engage in learning? And Eugenia, like you are living, you are providing that care level first to attend to their basic needs, to make sure that that's taken care of before even moving on and doing that science engagement. So that we really need to keep in mind that people's lived realities and they're all, their context that they're living in is so different across the board. So thank you so much for that. That it was really, really good. I'm being reminded to tell you that we are likely going to run 10 minutes over because the AGM for CASC went 10 minutes over, and we're not going to, cut into this awesome panel time because AGM went over, right? Everyone, thumbs up. Good. Okay. If you need to leave, we completely understand, but just so you know, we are going to go over till about 3:40. With that said, Anthony, your turn. I have to change my page. Hang on a second. Do you want to pipe in here a little bit, sort of from an individual question or an individual response on how you see or how you're using perhaps evidence-based approaches to foster science values in this crazy time?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love what Eugenia and what Samantha had to say. I think that it all speaks to the underlying necessity for building trust with the audience you're communicating with. And if you show up at their door when they're in need with food in your arms, they trust you. And if you can express an understanding for where somebody's coming from, why they might be a little bit weary of pharmaceutical companies, and you can say, I'm with you, then it builds trust. It's really indispensable. So I just wanted to get that out of the way because it made my heart warm when I heard both of them speaking. From my perspective, I mean, I'm really about fostering these kinds of values, and they seem nebulous, and so I think it's probably valuable to try to figure out how you might actually measure them. And my strategy is more or less to stand on the shoulders of giants. So there are a couple of researchers, Ashley Landrum from Texas Tech University and Dan Kahan from Yale, who've developed this measure called science curiosity. And polarization is a problem that we're kind of struggling with as a society right now, and it makes science communication challenging and science engagement challenging. One of the things that's really spectacular about this new measure, Science Curiosity, is that it seems to predict depolarization. That is, when people are higher in this measure, if you present them with new information, they become less polarized, which is really exciting. And so you can measure people on this scale. And so my strategy is to try to, in my own research, I measure it behaviorally with a game that we have our participants play called Freestyle Socials. So this game, we sort of show up at a bar or a student center or someplace. We put tape down the middle of the floor and we ask what I call spark questions. So some of you will know some of my favorite questions, but they're things like, should we erase bad memories? Or should we design our kids' DNA? Should we pee in the shower? They're meant to be questions that are sort of science can speak to, but not necessarily answer. And then we'll make everybody pick a side. People are all surprised at what side their friends pick. Oh, you pee in the shower? What's wrong with you? And then each side we'll put a microphone in the middle of the floor. Each side of the room gets to explain to the other side why you should come over to ours. And there are two really simple rules. Rule number one is, if you hear an idea that surprises you, you should suspend your judgment, change your mind, and cross the line, walk across the line to the other side. Rule number two is change your mind again. I really don't care what side of the line you end up on. Our goal is just to practice changing our minds, which seems to be a thing we're kind of having a tough time with right now. And so for my research, I'm counting those behavioral kinds of measures. Like I'm counting line crosses. And one of the hypotheses of my research is that line crossing behavior will correlate tightly with your scores on the Science Curiosity scale, your openness to changing your mind. And so if that turns out to be the case, then we can actually we can look at the data and see, well, what things actually increase line crossing behavior. And as a consequence, you could argue they might increase curiosity. So I think coming up with new measures to understand those things are some of the strategies we probably can and should take, and that's just one example.
Fascinating. And having been privy to Anthony's research because I'm on his thesis committee, woohoo! Really glad to hear you sum it up that way, and well done. You passed your. No, I'm just joking. For the folks that are for everybody that's on here who are involved in science centers. We know that what we would like to, what I think Science Center folks want to know is, what's their role perhaps with you, or how can Science Centers help everyone, like help the three of you get to your vision of science engagement? And I see that Marianne has just flipped the slide to show you their contact information. So watch out, your inboxes are going to get full. Lots of new Twitter followers and Instagram followers. But yeah, I think that's what we're trying to sort of wrap this up with, I think, Marianne and everyone else, is how can science centers help you get to your vision of science engagement? So how about I start with Eugenia and then go to Anthony and then go to Samantha?
I think for me, it's knowing that, I know Marianne mentioned the word ecosystem and it gets a bad rap, but I think, again, science centers are part of a learning ecosystem, a very fundamental one, and recognizing that the communities around you, there are resources that you have that you might not even realize beyond just the science. There are other resources that you have that you might not even realize that can really help foster, supplement the learning from a holistic approach that's necessary for our communities. And so I think just kind of being introspective and thinking through that, I think that there are ways that the science centers can be of complete I guess assistance to the community. I know we're really connected with the Ontario Science Centre, and our kids go there so much that they're like, oh yeah, I've been so far, like that's my second home. And for them to feel that way and to feel that affinity, and yes, they say exactly like that. That's important. You want that as a science center. So get to that place where you feel so confident and comfortable that they can just almost waltz in there. And feel like they belong.
Absolutely. Love it. What a great place to feel that they just, yeah, like we belong there. Totally. It's my second home. Absolutely. Wonderful. Okay. Samantha. How do science centers help you?
So my vision and my big goal is that we can stop thinking of social media as an afterthought, and we can instead start thinking about it when we're planning new exhibits. Call up me or any of the other amazing communicators and scientists on social media, and let's brainstorm how can we make this exhibit such an immersive experience that when people come, they're going to engage, but they're also going to take out their phones. Don't get mad. I know you don't want them on their phones, but they're going to take out their phones and they're going to do free advertising for you. They're going to share with their friends. And that way, folks who can't make it to the Science Center can now learn through their friends, or maybe they'll be so compelled to make the trip when they're allowed to do it in person. And so I really want to work together in a way where we can build such immersive and exciting experiences that people feel compelled to share and post on their own social networks how exciting visiting a science center is. And even in a virtual capacity, there's still a way for us to have a sharing mentality. What can I do to make this event so engaging, people will feel compelled to share? And that's how we really break through echo chambers, get new people involved, and get a lot of people excited. But it requires planning ahead of time and not just, oh, someone put the tweet out because this thing's coming. It needs to be a little more thoughtful and strategic. But when you do that, and when you partner with people, and there's tons of people in Canada, that's where some really cool magic happens.
Perfect. Awesome. Be more strategic. And I use the word intentional a lot too. Like, do it with intention. Like, start with the intent,
yes.
Not an afterthought. Yeah. Intentional and strategic. Awesome. Anthony, I got to keep you to 1 to 2 minutes. What would you like science centers to do for you?
I would say let's collaborate. I mean, we have built the digital version of the Freestyle Social event we have been running, and it's designed to be scalable, easily deployable. We produce all kinds of guides and things to help first-time moderators. And the goal from my perspective is I want to see this game become as ubiquitous as trivia nights, because I think that from my own experience at these events, it's been a really powerful experience for attendees. They love exploring the science and they want to come back to it. We're already working with TEDx Toronto to unpack their conference events, and we're working with university students and biomedical sciences students to unpack their trickier ethical issues. And I just want to see this be used by as many groups as possible, because it's been really fun. So I guess reach out, let me know, and I'd be happy to chat with anybody.
Gosh, I'm sure that everyone feels the same way. I wish we had another hour to really delve into everything that all of you have talked about. I've taken a bunch of notes that I wanted to follow up on, but it's 3:38 on my calendar, which means we have 2 minutes to end this. I have to say a really huge, great, big thank you to everyone for tuning in. Thank you to CASC for really pulling this together. And of course, our wonderful panelists for taking the time to share your ideas, especially in this time where I'm sure that you have a million things to do and a million places to not be, but be virtually. So there's clearly so much more that we can do as a science center community to support this science engagement and the future of science engagement. And there's a lot of lessons that we can take from what you've done here. All of you have the contact information from our panelists. Please reach out to them if you have something that you'd like to follow up with them about. Thank you for your contributions, and the chat's blowing up right now with yay, scaling up and doing that is going to be so great if we can see this happening across the country. I think, Marianne, I'm going to hand it over to you now. And je voulais dire un merci en français. Désolée, je voulais dire un merci en français. Merci à tout le monde. Merci à nos gens qui nous ont joints partout dans le pays, en français, en anglais, tous les participants. Merci aux intervenants, en particulier Eugenia, Samantha et Anthony. Un gros merci en français comme en anglais. Alors, Marianne, I am going to hand it over to you and let you take over from here.
Merci beaucoup. This is basically our AGM and our panel have ended. Thank you again to everyone who attended, to our panelists, to all of our moderators. I think we can say this was a successful event. I see people are tuning out. I'm actually going to stay online. Tracy and I will both stay online maybe for about 10 minutes in case there are any follow-up questions or conversations. So I'm going to keep the meeting open, but it is now officially ended. Thank you, everybody.